I thought about what I loved about Europe and what I loved about France in particular. And part of that is the joy of small daily treasures in your daily life that represent quality and aesthetic, beauty and pleasure. And the macaron represents that to me. A French macaron is actually quite small, but the flavor is so intense and so delicate and so refined that you treasure it. You bite into it and you feel like you're somewhere special. You're doing something very special. And so one or two is your sweet fix for the day. You're completely satisfied and you've had something that is of the highest quality and you've treated yourself well. And I love that. I love, in Europe, they call it the opposite of fast life, of fast food. They call it slow life. And it's slowing down for a moment to enjoy the best that life has to offer. And when it comes to gastronomy, that means real butter, real cream, real chocolate. You will never find lard or corn syrup in a macaron, ever. It's just the antithesis of what the macaron represents. And so I thought that I would try my hand at opening up a little maison de macaron in Havre. That's my story, and I call it Les Petits Bisous. Les Petits Bisous means little kisses in French, because the very first time I saw macaron in Paris at La Durée, I have 8 varieties here at the shop that I make on premise, but they have 30 or 40 varieties in their boutique, and it's just beautiful, the colors, the display of the macaron. And my first thought when I saw them was, these are beautiful little kisses. And so that's what I decided to name my shop. The history of the macaron is interesting. It was actually in the cookie part of it, which is naturally gluten-free for all of you people who are not eating gluten these days, was invented in the 1600s in Italy. It's a cookie that's a wafer-type cookie that's based on a meringue of egg white, almond meal, and powdered sugar. When Marie Antoinette was queen in France, Queen Catherine de' Medici from Italy came to visit her, and with her as a gift, she brought the Italian macaron. That's how the macaron was introduced to France. Marie Antoinette was a fan. That was well known. Well, then there was the French Revolution. She was gone, and in the mid-1800s, there was a movement to bring back the grace of the aristocrat. La Durée, who was a scholar, a social thinker, a writer, a poet, he was also a patisserie, and he made pastry, and he opened La Durée. And he sold in honor of Marie Antoinette and what she represented for high society in France, the macaron. And he had a tea that was a blend called the Marie Antoinette tea that was named after her. It was actually his grandson, Pierre de Fontaine, who decided that La Durée, first of all, would have a very special type of macaron. And he took the 2 wafers and filled them with chocolate, and then he filled them with buttercream, and he filled them with fruit preserves. So he actually invented the double-decker macaron that is known today as the Parisian macaron. He also was a social thinker, and he created a tea house that would be the first place in France that was acceptable for ladies to go in public without being escorted by a man. And this was actually in the 1930s. And so if you can imagine, in the 1930s, women in France couldn't vote yet. And they couldn't go out, and it wasn't socially acceptable to go out in public by themselves without being escorted by men. And so women started to go to La Durée and to talk in public and to socialize in public for the very first time. That is one of the reasons that part of history that I always brought my mother to La Durée when she would come visit me in Paris, and we would sit, and the room is filled with artifacts or interior design from the 1860s. You have little cherubs in the corner that are wearing pastry chef hats, and it's all in Rococo, and you have gold gilded mirrors on the walls and tiny little marble tables that you sit at, and it's really an experience. And my mother always ordered the Marie Antoinette tea to go with her French macaron. So That is the correct story of the French macaron in Paris. The Italian one was basically just the wafer. And it was a mixture, it was a meringue of almond meal, confection sugar, and egg, but there was no official ratio between the two. And people basically made them how they wanted to make them. And they looked kind of individualized because it really changes the texture and the look of it, how you do the ratio between the egg white, the almond meal, and the confectioner sugar. In France, it became more standardized, and it became the French macaron, the way they had it in France. And it is a ratio down to the gram of how many grams of egg white per how many grams of sugar per how many grams of almond meal. Laduré's grandson created the double-decker, the I-cell that you'll find in Paris. There's 4 or 5 well-established maisons de macaron in Paris that sell the Parisian macaron, and that's what it is, the double-decker, 2 wafers with the cream or the buttercream or the preserves or the chocolate ganache in between them.
But that was really in the early 1900s.
Yes, it was in 1930. I just this week got my boxes in. These are custom-made boxes based on the traditional macaron box. And the La Durée boxes are my inspiration. These boxes are sturdy enough and pretty enough to where you won't want to throw them away, you want to save them. And although I can't, they're a very humble representation of the La Durée boxes. La Durée boxes, a couple times a year, our haute couture designer will design the new La Durée box. And you can buy La Durée boxes on eBay. They're so beautiful. I have one on my desk that I've had for 4 or 5 years that I will never throw away. But these are pretty, and they do say Havre de Grace on them. They say French macarons and Havre de Grace, and I'm very proud of them.